Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and really pull out those crucial nuggets of knowledge, giving you a shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into a fascinating, often overlooked corner of American history. We're focusing on a figure widely considered, one of the least memorable presidents, Chester A. Arthur.
Least memorable. It is a striking label, isn't it?
It really is. But does that truly reflect his impact? Or is there maybe a compelling, perhaps even transformative story waiting just beneath that sort of historical anonymity?
That's exactly the question, right? The perception of Arthur as forgettable, well, it often overshadows a genuinely profound and sometimes, deeply ironic transformation he went through. He was a man absolutely steeped in the machine politics of his time, yet his administration brought about these significant, really surprising changes that, echo even today. Public perception can be a tricky thing. It often obscures the true historical significance.
Absolutely. So let's formally introduce our subject. Chester Alan Arthur, the 21st President of the United States. He served from 1881 to 1885. And his path to the Oval Office, well, it was nothing short of dramatic. He'd previously served as the 20th Vice President under James A. Garfield.
Yeah.
And the circumstances that really thrust him into the highest office, they're a deep dive in themselves, aren't they? Full of political machinations, personal tragedies, unexpected turns of the Gilded Age.
And that's really our mission in this deep dive, to peel back those layers, those surface-level historical footnotes. We're drawing from some comprehensive biographical accounts, historical analyses, sources that trace Arthur's life right from his birth through his post-presidency.
Right.
Our goal is to uncover those rich details that reveal his complex character, the surprising shifts in his policies, and the often overlooked legacy he left behind. We want to get at the why and the how of his time in office, understand the forces that shaped him, the key decisions he made.
Think of us as your expert guides, sort of sifting through all this material to give you a truly informed perspective on a figure who, well, defied expectations at almost every turn. We promise an engaging, fact-filled conversation. Hopefully you'll leave with a completely new understanding of Chester A. Arthur. So settle in, because this story begins not in the halls of power, but in a quiet Vermont town. 1. Early life, family roots, and the persistent birther controversies. Okay, so let's start with Arthur's early life. His birth in Fairfield, Vermont, October 5, 1829. Now, here's an intriguing little human detail right off the bat. Later in life, and apparently out of what one biographer just called vanity, he'd sometimes claim he was born in 1830.
Really? Just shaved a year off.
Yeah, just like that. It's a small thing, but maybe it hints at a certain awareness of image, an early glimpse into the man.
That is fascinating. And it certainly hints at a character who was, aware of public perception. His family background was quite diverse, actually, provides this rich tapestry of influences and kind of sets the stage for a life marked by movement and strong convictions. His mother, Malvina Stone, was born in Vermont, English and Welsh roots. Her maternal grandfather, Uriah Stone, he actually served in the Continental Army during the Revolution.
Wow.
And on his father's side, William Arthur, born in County Antrim, Ireland, 1796, Presbyterian family. He graduated college in Belfast, then made that big journey across the Atlantic, migrating to Lower Canada around 1819, 1820.
And it was there, in Dunham, Quebec, not far from the Vermont border, actually, that Malvina Stone and William Arthur met. They got married on April 12, 1821. So a real blend of these American and Irish influences.
Yeah, and after their first child, Regina, was born in Canada, the family moved pretty quickly to Vermont. That really marked the beginning of a lifetime of relocations for young Chester. William Arthur's career path, it was varied and had a big impact on the family. He started as a teacher, then briefly studied law.
Okay.
But then, in Waterville, Vermont, he made this profound shift. He left his legal studies, left his Presbyterian roots, and joined the Free Will Baptists. For the rest of his life, he served as a minister in that denomination, becoming an incredibly outspoken abolitionist.
Oh, that's key.
Absolutely. Because his fervent anti-slavery views, well, they were often unpopular with some congregations, especially in certain areas. And that directly led to the family moving frequently across Vermont and upstate New York. You can imagine the constant upheaval for a young family.
Oh, definitely. That constant movement must have shaped him somehow. Chester was the 5th of 9 children, and his names. Pretty straightforward, actually. Chester, after Dr. Chester Abel, who helped with his birth, and Alan for his paternal grandfather. Kind of a glimpse into the practicalities of life back then.
Yeah, simple enough.
So as you can imagine, with a minister father moving around because of his strong abolitionist stance, Chester's childhood was just this dynamic series of moves The family lived in numerous towns across Vermont, Burlington, Jericho, Waterville, and then across upstate New York, too, places like York, Perry, Greenwich, Lansingburg, Hoosick.
Wow, quite the list.
Yeah, they finally settled in Schenectady around 1844. So he had this really varied, maybe even a bit disorienting experience of small-town America.
And yet, despite all those moves and the challenges they must have presented, early accounts describe him as a boy who was frank and open in manners and genial in disposition. Friendly kid, it sounds like. He showed his political leanings pretty early, too. A Whig. He even got into a brawl supporting Henry Clay in the heated 1844 election.
Really? A future president in a street fight?
Apparently so.
Huh.
And he also showed a strong connection to his Irish heritage,
Yeah.
supporting the Fenian Brotherhood, that Irish nationalist group, by famously wearing a green coat, a nod to his father's roots. His academic journey, though, was surprisingly consistent amidst all the moving. Prep schools, like the Lyceum of Union Village, a grammar school in Schenectady. Then he enrolled at Union College in 1845, studied the classics, joined Psi Upsilon fraternity, got elected president of the Debate Society, even inducted into Phi Beta Kappa. Pretty accomplished.
And he taught during winter breaks to pay for it all. Shows some serious work ethic early on.
Definitely.
Okay, now this next bit. It might sound strikingly familiar to anyone listening today. Chester Arthur, the future president, actually faced a kind of birther controversy.
That's right. It's almost uncanny, isn't it?
Yeah.
When he was nominated for vice president in 1880, his political opponents, notably this New York lawyer, Arthur P. Hinman, first floated the idea that Arthur was born in Ireland.
Okay.
When that didn't really stick, Hinman pivoted, spreading a new rumor that Arthur was actually born in Canada.
And this wasn't just mudslinging, right? This had serious constitutional implications.
Exactly. These claims directly challenged his eligibility for the presidency under the natural-born citizen clause of the Constitution. That clause, designed to ensure a president's loyalty, meant if he wasn't born on U.S. soil, he legally couldn't be president. It was a serious threat, weaponized by his opponents.
But the facts just didn't back it up, did they?
Not at all. There were multiple U.S. Census entries from before he was politically prominent. The Arthur Family Bible itself, numerous contemporary newspaper articles, even ones talking about his 1871 appointment as collector, all clearly listed his birthplace as Fairfield, Vermont.
Right.
And what's really crucial here is the lack of any plausible motive for him to have faked these records. Back when he was born, or even in his early career, the presidency wasn't even remotely on the horizon for him or his family.
Good point.
The idea that they'd meticulously alter documents years in advance for some unforeseen future run, it doesn't hold water.
Yeah.
The evidence overwhelmingly points to Vermont. These birther claims were pure Gilded Age political smearing. 2. Early career. From law to pioneering civil rights advocacy.
So after graduating from Union College in 1848, Arthur didn't immediately become a lawyer. He actually kept teaching full-time for a while. Places like Schaghticoke and North Pownell, Vermont.
Yeah, all while studying law on the side. It really shows how focused and determined he was. Balancing work, academic ambitions.
And here's a fun bit of trivia. James A. Garfield, the man Arthur would eventually succeed as president, taught penmanship at that same North Pownell school just 3 years later.
Isn't that something? Though apparently they never actually crossed paths there. Anyway, in 1853, after studying law in Ballston Spa, New York, Arthur had saved enough to make the big move to New York City.
Right.
There, he started to read law in the office of Erastus D. Culver. Culver was a prominent abolitionist lawyer, a family friend. This was a pivotal move. Put him on the path to law and, maybe unknowingly, towards civil rights work.
He got admitted to the New York bar in 1854, joined Culver's firm. It became Culver, Parker, and Arthur. And pretty quickly, he got involved in some really groundbreaking legal stuff, especially civil rights. That's surprising for the guy known later as a patronage boss.
It really is where his early career takes this unexpected turn. He was actively involved in the landmark Lemon v. New York case.
What was that about?
It was a habeas corpus action against Jonathan Lemon, a Virginia slaveholder just passing through New York with 8 enslaved people. Culver, Arthur's senior partner, argued successfully that New York law automatically freed any slave arriving in the state. Huge victory for abolitionists. Affirmed New York as a free state, it was upheld by the New York Court of Appeals in 1860.
And Arthur's role?
Minor in that specific case, but he was definitely an active participant in a firm deeply committed to abolitionism. It shows this early alignment with, principles of justice and freedom, foundational stuff we might not associate with him later.
And that wasn't the only one. There was another huge civil rights case in 1854 where Arthur was the lead attorney, representing Elizabeth Jennings Graham, a black woman physically thrown off a New York City streetcar just because of her race.
Imagine the courage that took for her to sue and for a young white lawyer like Arthur to take her case back then.
Absolutely.
And the outcome was monumental. Arthur won. The verdict didn't just compensate her, it directly led to the desegregation of all New York City streetcar lines.
Wow, that's huge.
It really is. A powerful early example of his direct impact on civil rights. Shows his legal skill, his underlying sense of justice, long before he get deep into the often morally gray world of high-stakes politics. It definitely challenges that simple narrative that he was only a spoilsman.
On the personal side, things were moving too. In 1856, he started courting Ellen Lewis Herndon, daughter of William Lewis Herndon, a respected Virginia naval officer. They got engaged, but then tragedy struck. Her father was lost at sea. They married in 1859 in Manhattan. They'd go on to have 3 kids. William Lewis, who sadly died young, Chester Allen II, known as Allen, and a daughter, Ellen, or Nell.
So family life starting.
Yeah.
But he still had these other interests, right? Military stuff.
Yeah, he became Judge Advocate General for the 2nd Brigade of the New York Militia, an early sign of his administrative skills, maybe.
And there was that brief, kind of ill-fated trip out to Kansas with a new law partner.
Right, during Bleeding Kansas. That whole violent clash between pro- and anti-slavery settlers. Arthur firmly sided with the anti-slavery group, even went there planning to set up a law practice.
But the rough frontier life probably didn't suit the refined New Yorkers much.
Apparently not. After just 3 or 4 months, he was back in New York City. Seems he preferred the established, even if politically charged, urban scene. His talents were clearly more in administration and law than roughing it on the frontier. 3, Civil War service and entry into New York politics.
So when the Civil War breaks out, Arthur's administrative talents really come into play.
Yeah, 1861, he gets appointed to Governor Edwin D. Morgan's military staff as engineer-in-chief. Sounds kind of minor on paper, right?
It does, but it became far more significant than that title suggests. What started as a fairly typical patronage appointment of minor importance suddenly became critical when the war began in April '61. Northern states, especially New York, the biggest, faced this unprecedented, chaotic job, raising, equipping, housing massive volunteer armies.
And Arthur's skills, his organization, that's what they needed.
Precisely. His meticulous abilities were perfect for bringing order to that chaos.
And his rise was quick. Commissioned Brigadier General, assigned to the state militia's quartermaster department, basically the state's chief logistics guy.
And he proved incredibly efficient, housing, feeding, outfitting the thousands and thousands of troops pouring into New York City, getting them ready for battle. This efficiency got noticed. Promotions followed. Inspector General of the State Militia in March '62, then Quartermaster General that July.
It says a lot that he actually turned down combat commands, right? Including the 9th New York Volunteer Infantry and the Metropolitan Brigade?
Yeah, he declined them at Governor Morgan's request. He chose to stay in that vital administrative role, understanding how crucial it was for the war effort. The closest he got to the front was inspecting New York troops near Fredericksburg, Virginia in May '62. His focus was clearly logistics and supply that crucial, often unsung part of wartime success. He saved lives and got troops ready.
But like so many jobs back then, it was inherently a political appointment.
Exactly.
So no big surprise when he was removed in January 1863. A Democrat, Horatio Seymour, became governor, replacing the Republican Morgan. Spoils system in action even during a war. His removal, while expected politically, actually opened new doors. Arthur went back to practicing law. His firm, Arthur and Gardner, it flourished because of all the contacts and the reputation for efficiency he'd built during the war.
Right.
On a much sadder note, though, 1863 was also when his 2-year-old son, William, died suddenly.
Oh, that's tragic.
Yeah, it deeply affected both Arthur and his wife, Ellen. They apparently lavished even more attention on their surviving kids, Chester Allen Jr. and Nell. That personal grief probably shaped the man who re-entered politics later.
And as the war ended, the political landscape shifted again. New opportunities opened up for guys in Governor Morgan's Republican machine, Arthur included. This is when he really aligns himself firmly with the conservative wing of the Republican Party, led by big names like Thurlow Weed and, crucially for Arthur, the powerful Roscoe Conkling. That connection would shape the next and maybe most infamous part of his career. 4. The rise of a New York political machine man, Conkling's protege.
So Arthur jumps right into the thick of New York Republican machine politics. It was a robust, often pretty rough world.
Yeah, we see an early attempt in 1866. He tried but failed to get the job of naval officer at the New York Custom House. A really coveted, lucrative post, second only to the collector, shows he knew where the power and money were.
His ambition was clear. But the political climate then, it was all about loyalty and hard work on the machine's behalf. That was more important than holding specific political office.
It was a system where party service, not policy brilliance, was the way up.
Exactly. And you need to understand the players here. The Stalwarts, led by Conkling, Arthur was one of them. They were the old guard Republicans, fiercely committed to the spoils system, party patronage. They believed loyalty and rewards built strong parties.
And they were opposed by
The half-breeds, associated with James G. Blaine, generally more open to civil service reform, but maybe more for practical reasons, cleaning up the party image, not totally dismantling the system that still helped them.
Got it. So Arthur, as a stalwart, knew this system inside out.
Absolutely. And his connection with Roscoe Conkling, elected to the Senate in 1867, that was pivotal. Conkling saw Arthur's talent and loyalty, and he noticed Arthur and facilitated his rise in the party. That relationship was the bedrock of Arthur's political power.
And rise he did. Became chairman of the New York City Republican Executive Committee in 1868. Shows his organizational skill, his political smarts. But this intense focus on politics, it came at a personal cost, didn't it? His wife, Ellen, reportedly resented his continual absence from the family home on party business. Paints a picture of a man totally dedicated to politics, maybe too much so for his family.
It certainly humanizes the political machine a bit. The Conkling machine backed General Ulysses S. Grant hard for president in '68. Arthur was right there, raising crucial funds. It was a time of fierce rivalries, especially with the Tammany Hall Democratic machine in New York City. They backed Grant's opponent, Horatio Seymour.
And Grant won nationally, but Seymour actually carried New York State.
Yeah, narrowly. Shows how intense the local competition was and how important guys like Arthur were for mobilizing the vote. Arthur's involvement just kept deepening. In 1869, he became counsel to the New York City Tax Commission. Lucrative political appointment, salary of $10,000 a year.
Which today is?
Over $248,000. Significant money. But his time there was short. He resigned in 1870 when Democrats won control of the state legislature. Shows how precarious these patronage jobs were you were in as long as your party was in power. 5. Collector of the Port of New York. The apex of patronage and corruption.
Okay, so after climbing the ranks of the New York Republican machine, Arthur's about to step into this massive role. Collector of the Port of New York. Really the peak of patronage power, and for reformers, a huge symbol of the era's corruption.
Exactly. In 1870, President Grant, looking to consolidate support, basically gave Roscoe Conkling significant control over New York patronage, including the hugely profitable Custom House. After the previous collector, Thomas Murphy, resigned, Grant nominated Arthur in December 1871.
And the New York Times had that interesting quote about him, right? Even though he wasn't a big public figure.
Yeah, they said something like, his name very seldom rises to the surface. And yet, moving like a mighty undercurrent, this man, during the last 10 years, has done more to mold the course of the Republican Party in this state than any other one man. They saw his quiet influence. This wasn't just an appointment. It was the appointment in New York.
And the power of the collector. It was immense, wasn't it? Controlling nearly 1,000 jobs, overseeing tariffs at the busiest port in the U.S.
Absolutely. It was a political goldmine, a cash cow for the party. And the financial incentives were just staggering. A key part was the moiety system.
Explain that again.
Okay, imagine you, the listener, are a senior customs employee, maybe even the collector. You get a percentage of any seized cargoes and fines levied on importers trying to cheat the system.
Wow. So the people stopping fraud profited directly from it.
Exactly. Clear conflict of interest. A legal way to get incredibly wealthy. Perfect example of the Gilded Age, blurring lines between public service and personal gain. This system boosted Arthur's income to more than $50,000 a year. That's like over $1.3 million today. Way more than the president's salary. It let him keep up his reputation for fancy clothes, a lavish lifestyle. Cemented that gentleman boss image.
What's really fascinating, though, is this paradox. How could he be popular and efficient while running a system seen as so corrupt? He had this unique reputation as collector, didn't he?
He did. He was considered one of the era's more popular collectors among people who actually dealt with the Custom House. Known for getting along with subordinates, rarely fired anyone, partly because his predecessor had already filled the place with Conkling loyalists.
Okay.
And he was popular within the party because he was so good at collecting campaign assessments, basically mandatory donations from staff. And he was great at placing party leaders' friends in jobs. rewarding loyalty, keeping the machine strong. As the reform movement grew, Arthur, maybe as a nod to critics or maybe just politics, even renamed those assessments voluntary contributions in 1872. But the core idea, leveraging government jobs for party money, stayed put, showed his mastery of the system, even as it was coming under fire.
Which brings us to the big clash. President Rutherford B. Hayes. The 1876 election, Hayes wins a Republican nomination, pledges to reform the very patronage system Arthur represented. Direct threat.
Hayes didn't waste time. 1877, he goes right after Conkling's machine, specifically the New York Custom House, appoints the Jay Commission to investigate.
And their findings were bad.
Damning. Custom House overstaffed with political appointments, said 20% of employees were expendable. Hayes then issues this bold executive order forbidding assessments, barring federal office holders from political management.
And Arthur and his guys.
They refused to obey the president's order. Open defiance. Arthur even turned down an offer from Secretary Sherman the consulship in Paris if he'd just resign. Shows how committed he was to his faction, his refusal to be bought off.
So Hayes demanded their resignations. They refused. Hayes sends new nominees to the Senate, including Theodore Roosevelt Sr.
But Conkling, chairing the powerful Senate Commerce Committee, retaliates. Gets the committee to unanimously reject all the nominees. The full Senate follows, rejecting Roosevelt and Prince. Merit only got confirmed because the surveyor's term expired, creating a vacancy Hayes could fill.
But Arthur's job was only safe until
July 1878. Hayes was relentless. Used a congressional recess, finally fired Arthur and Cornell, replaced them with recess appointments, Merritt and Silas W. Burt. Arthur again turns down the Paris consul general job, stays in the fight.
this whole episode really sets up that incredible paradox, doesn't it?
It really does.
How does this guy, so deep in the patronage system, willing to defy a president over it, become the champion of civil service reform in his own presidency? That's the transformation we need to get into. 6. The unlikely vice president and the tragic assassination of Garfield.
So after getting fired, Arthur doesn't sulk. He jumps right back into New York politics. Works for Edward Cooper's election as NYC mayor. Then, September 1879, he gets another key post. Chairman of the New York State Republican Executive Committee. Leads the party in his state until October 81. Shows his resilience, his continued influence.
And he and Conkling, they pull off a big win in the 1879 state elections, right?
Yeah.
Getting Stalwart nominees elected.
Yeah, a clear slapback at President Hayes and their rivals within the party. Show the machine still had muscle. But amidst this political comeback, Arthur suffers this terrible personal blow. January 1880, while he's up in Albany organizing things, his wife Ellen died suddenly. Pneumonia.
Oh, that's awful.
It hit him incredibly hard. He was devastated and perhaps racked with guilt over his frequent absences.
Yeah.
He never remarried. That grief undoubtedly shaped the man who was about to face this unbelievable turn of events.
Which brings us to the 1880 Republican National Convention. A real chaotic scene. Stalwarts, Arthur and Conkling leading the charge, pushing hard for ex-President Grant's third term. Their rivals, the half-breeds, backing James G. Blaine. Classic Republican faction fight.
And the convention just deadlocks, right? Literally. After an astonishing 36 ballots, neither Grant nor Blaine can get a majority. This leads to the totally unexpected selection of a dark horse, James A. Garfield. Ohio congressman, Civil War general. See, is neither a hardcore stalwart nor a half-breed, a compromise nobody saw coming.
But Garfield knew he couldn't win the general election without the New York stalwarts, that massive voting bloc. So they had to offer the vice presidency to one of Conkling's guys.
Levi P. Morton, New York banker, congressman, he was the first choice. But after talking to Conkling, he turned it down, thought the Republicans would lose.
So then they go to Arthur.
Right. Conkling again advises him to say no. But Arthur, maybe seeing an opportunity Conkling missed, thought otherwise and accepted. There's that famous, maybe apocryphal story of Arthur telling Conkling, the office of the vice president is a greater honor than I ever dreamed of attaining. Whether it happened exactly like that or not, it captures the moment. Conkling, eventually, swallowed his pride and campaigned for the ticket. Party unity, even if grudging.
And the 1880 election against the Democrat General Winfield Scott Hancock, it was incredibly close, wasn't it? One of the tightest ever.
It really was. The Republicans started off using the bloody shirt tactic, waving the Civil War flag, basically, saying electing Democrats would undo the Union victory.
But that was wearing thin by then.
Yeah, 15 years after the war, Union generals on both tickets. It wasn't as effective. So they quickly shifted focus to the protective tariff, argued lowering it would cost American jobs. That hit home in swing states like New York and Indiana.
And Hancock made that gaffe about the tariff being a local question.
Exactly. Made him look uninformed on a huge national issue. Didn't help him.
And Arthur's role as New York chair was crucial here. Raising money, getting out the vote.
Absolutely critical. His machine delivered.
And the result?
A razor-thin win.
Republicans carried New York by just 20,000 votes. Nationally, popular vote margin was only 7,018 votes. Record turnout, 78.4%.
Electoral College was more decisive, 214 to 155. So Garfield and Arthur win. But the relationship soured fast.
So?
Arthur tried to get Garfield to appoint stalwarts to key cabinet jobs, especially Treasury, to honor the deal. Garfield refused. Pointedly appointed James G. Blaine, Conkling's archenemy, as Secretary of State, froze out the stalwarts, signaled his independence.
Ouch!
Yeah. That, plus Arthur made this ill-considered speech before inauguration, hinting at dirty tricks in Indiana's election. By Inauguration Day, March 4th, 1881, the president and VP were clearly estranged, barely speaking.
Arthur's first job as VP put him right in the spotlight, though, casting the earliest tie-breaking vote in Senate history.
That's right, to give Republicans control of all the Senate committees, huge for the party agenda.
But the stalwarts took another big hit around then, didn't they? Conkling and Platt resigning from the Senate.
Yeah, a dramatic protest against Garfield, appointing William H. Robertson as collector of the Port of New York, Arthur's old job, seen as a direct insult to their patronage power. But their gamble backfired. They failed to get reelected by the New York legislature. Huge blow to their prestige, weakened the stalwarts further, and left Arthur politically kind of isolated. His main patron, Conkling, was losing clout.
The pivotal tragic moment, July 10th, 1881. Arthur gets the horrifying news. President Garfield's been shot.
Yeah. And the assassin, Charles J. Guiteau, this deranged office seeker who felt entitled to a job he proclaims during the shooting, I am a stalwart and Arthur will be president.
Oh my God, imagine hearing that.
Unbelievable. It's crucial to stress Guiteau was profoundly mentally unstable. His connection to Arthur and the stalwarts was tenuous at best, more a delusion. He bizarrely thought his act would help Arthur and the country. Later even wrote a poem claiming Arthur knew and expected a pardon. Utterly untrue, of course.
But the real crisis then was the succession issue, right? Yeah. No clear legal guidance.
Exactly. Garfield lingered near death for 79 agonizing days. Nobody knew who, if anyone, could legally exercise presidential power. And compounding it, the Senate had adjourned without electing a president pro tempore, the person next in line after Arthur.
So there was this agonizing void of authority for 2 months. You can imagine the president incapacitated, unable to govern, but still legally in office.
And Arthur, the VP, couldn't step in without looking like he was grabbing power. And there was no clear legal way anyway. It was a genuine constitutional crisis. The nation was leaderless, vulnerable.
September 19, Arthur learns Garfield has died.
His initial actions were remarkably swift, decisive. Showed a real focus on stability despite his own distress. He took the first oath of office from Judge John R. Brady in New York, 2:15 a.m., September 20th. But even before traveling to pay respects, he did something incredibly far-sighted. He prepared and mailed a proclamation calling for a Senate special session to ensure the line of succession. If he died suddenly, the Senate would have the legal authority to convene immediately, choose a president pro tempore, preventing another power vacuum. Once he got safely to Washington, he destroyed that mailed proclamation and issued a formal call. Amazing foresight in a crisis.
And he took a second oath in D.C. before the Chief Justice, just to be sure.
Yeah, September 22nd, before Chief Justice Morrison R. Waite. Just to ensure procedural compliance, address any lingering questions about a state judge giving a federal oath. These early moves showed this profound commitment to stability, order, setting a surprising tone for his presidency. 7. Arthur's presidency. The gentleman boss transforms.
So stepping into the presidency, Arthur immediately makes his mark on the White House itself. Found it too run down for his refined tastes.
Apparently so. He initially stayed at Senator John P. Jones's home, while the White House underwent this extensive and pretty expensive remodeling that Arthur ordered. He even sold off 24 wagon loads of old White House furniture, just cleared it out.
Wow, and the redecoration was quite something.
Oh yeah, very grand. Reflected Arthur's style, his commitment to aesthetics. It included adding that elaborate 50-foot glass screen by Louis Comfort Tiffany in the entrance hall. New wallpaper, furniture, complete overhaul. Really a reflection of Gilded Age opulence.
And since he was a widower, his younger sister, Mary McElroy, served as White House hostess.
That's right. She hosted elegant social events. Arthur quickly became Washington's most eligible bachelor. Lots of gossip about his social life, his sharp dressing.
But romantically.
It's widely believed he remained singularly devoted to the memory of his late wife, Ellen. He was also fiercely protective of his daughter, Nell, shielding her from the press when she joined him in D.C. in 1882. Wanted to keep her out of the spotlight.
Now, the cabinet. He immediately faced conflict with Garfield's cabinet, right? Mostly half-breeds, loyal to Garfield.
Yeah, big challenge. He asked them to stay till Congress reconvened, but several resigned pretty quickly. Treasury Secretary Wyndham left in October. Arthur strategically replaced him with Charles J. Folger, a close friend, New York stalwart, after Edwin D. Morgan said no. Attorney General Wayne McVeigh, a big reformer, resigned. Arthur replaced him with Benjamin H. Brewster, who, ironically, had reformist leanings.
And the big one, Secretary of State James G. Blaine, Conkling's nemesis.
High stakes there.
Yeah.
Conkling fully expected the job himself, as a reward. But Arthur, showing some independence, chose Frederick T. Frelinghuysen of New Jersey, a stalwart, but recommended by Grant, not Conkling directly.
Interesting move.
Frelinghuysen then advised Arthur against more stalwart appointments. Advice Arthur sometimes took appointing half-breed William E. Chandler as Navy Secretary, for example. But he still put Timothy O. Howe, a Wisconsin stalwart, as Postmaster General. Later, he tried for a more balanced approach. Henry M. Teller, Colorado stalwart, as Interior Secretary. Only War Secretary Robert Todd Lincoln stayed for Arthur's whole term. Shows the complex maneuvering involved as he slowly asserted his own authority.
His administration also inherited that major corruption mess, the Star Route scandal. Perfect example of the era's problems.
Oh, yes. Contractors for those star postal routes, mail delivery to remote areas getting greatly overpaid with the connivance of government officials. Rampant fraud.
And the fear among reformers was that Arthur, the ultimate spoilsman, wouldn't touch it.
Exactly. Widespread fear. This is a huge test of his supposed transformation. But Arthur flatly defied those expectations. His Attorney General, Brewster, continued the investigations with Arthur's full backing, hired prominent Democrats as lawyers to strengthen the prosecution, signal impartiality.
Wow.
Arthur himself forced resignations of officials suspected in the scandal, even one he'd worked closely with before, Stephen Wallace Dorsey. Showed an unexpected, principled commitment to rooting out corruption, no matter who it involved.
But getting justice was tough. The first trial in '82, not much success.
No. Convictions for only 2 minor guys, hung jury for the rest. Worse, allegations of jury bribery surfaced. The judge set aside the verdicts, ordered a new trial.
But Arthur didn't give up.
No, his resolve held. He removed 5 federal office holders sympathetic to the defense before the second trial. Really pushed for it. But the second trial, December '82 to July '83, again did not result in a guilty verdict for the main players. Frustrating.
So legally, a failure.
In terms of convictions, yes, it tarnished the administration's image. But Arthur did succeed in stopping the fraud. The system was reformed, payments ended, integrity restored. Showed his willingness to pursue justice even when it was politically hard and the legal results weren't great.
And now, the big one. What many see as the most surprising, most impactful turn. The gentleman boss of patronage becomes the champion of civil service reform, the core of his transformation.
The context here is just undeniable. Garfield's assassination by that deranged office seeker shouting he was a stalwart, it massively amplified the public demand for civil service reform.
The public was outraged.
Absolutely. And leaders in both parties quickly saw that embracing reform could win them support. By 1882, a strong bipartisan effort started shaping up. Democratic Senator George H. Pendleton of Ohio, who'd pushed this for years, reintroduced his bill. It proposed selecting civil servants based on merit as determined by an examination, not political connections.
And Arthur himself had actually called for reform legislation in his 1881 annual address, kind of setting the stage.
He had, surprisingly. The push gained real momentum after Republicans lost big in the 1882 congressional elections. Democrats campaigned hard on reform, showed the shift in public mood.
Right.
This made the lame duck session of Congress more amenable. Outgoing members didn't face political heat for supporting it. The bill passed the Senate big, 38-5, and the House strong too, 155-47. Broad support, even if reluctant sometimes.
And then, January 16, 1883, Arthur signs the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act into law. This came as a surprise to reformers who saw him as Conkling's guy, right?
Total surprise to many. But what's truly fascinating and key to his legacy is he didn't just sign it. He became its staunch implementer, actively dismantling the very patronage system that got him there.
How did he implement it?
Took swift action. Appointed prominent reformers, Dorman Bridgman Eaton, John Milton Gregory, Leroy D. Thulman to the new Civil Service Commission. And get this, the chief examiner for the commission, Silas W. Burt, the guy who'd been Arthur's opponent and replacement during the Custom House fights.
No way.
Yeah. Arthur gave the system his full, unequivocal support, defended it against critics.
And the impact? Was it real?
Immediate and significant.
Yeah.
Initially applied to only 10% of federal jobs, mostly custom houses, post offices. But just a year later, by 1884, half of all postal officials and 3/4 of the custom service jobs were to be awarded by merit through competitive exams. Arthur himself, in his 1884 address, said how satisfied he was with its effectiveness, praised its ability in securing competent and faithful public servants and protecting officials from the pressure of personal importunity. This wasn't just political maneuvering, it was a profound shift in American governance, and Arthur, the former gentleman boss, was its unexpected architect. 8. Key domestic policies and global stance.
Okay, let's look beyond civil service reform. What about other domestic policies? That big federal budget surplus was still a problem, right? $145 million by 1882. Huge money back then.
Yeah, a massive amount. And it spurred this intense debate, really divided the parties. Democrats generally wanted lower tariffs, reduce federal income, lower the cost of imports for people.
And Republicans like Arthur
Favored high tariffs, believed they protected American jobs, ensured high wages in manufacturing, mining. They preferred dealing with the surplus by spending more on internal improvements or cutting excise taxes on certain goods.
So Arthur, sticking with his party, proposed in 82, abolish excise taxes except on liquor, and simplify that really complex tariff structure.
Exactly. It had gotten super unwieldy since the war. To tackle this, Representative William D. Kelly introduced a bill for a tariff commission. Arthur signed it, appointed mostly protectionist to the committee, as you'd expect.
But then the committee surprised everyone.
Totally. They recommended significant tariff cuts, 20–25% average, recognized the burden high tariffs put on consumers.
But Congress ignored them. Power of vested interests.
Pretty much. Congress passed a bill reducing tariffs by only 1.47%. Arthur signed it best he could get, but it had no effect on the surplus. Left the issue unresolved, the debates raged on.
Congress then tried another way to spend the surplus. The Rivers and Harbors Act of 1882, unprecedented amount, $19 million for local projects.
Yeah, and while Arthur wasn't against internal improvements generally, he was really disturbed by the bill's sheer scale and its narrow focus on particular localities. He saw it as excessive pork barrel spending, more for political favors than national benefits.
So he vetoed it, August 1st, 1882.
He did. And it was met with widespread popular acclaim. Public, press, tired of wasteful spending. His veto message was clear. The money wasn't for the common defense or general welfare, didn't promote commerce among the states. Principled, stand against waste.
But Congress overrode the veto the next day.
They did. Reduced the surplus by $19 million, but it was a defiant move. Republicans later thought that decision, looking like they supported waste against a popular veto, hurt them badly in the 1882 elections. Arthur's veto, though overridden, really boosted his image as someone willing to stand on principle, even against his own party.
Okay, shifting to foreign affairs.
Yeah.
Under Garfield, Secretary of State Blaine had been pretty active in Latin America, right? Trade deals, mediating disputes, proposed Pan-American Conference.
Yeah, Blaine was ambitious. But when Frederick T. Frelinghuysen took over for Arthur, they discontinued Blaine's conference idea, feared it might drag the U.S. into the War of the Pacific between Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. They still pursued bilateral trade treaties, though, with Mexico, Santo Domingo, Spain's American colonies. But many failed to get enacted. Legislative hurdles, resistance from other countries shows the difficulties of diplomacy.
What about immigration policy?
Congress passed a bill regulating steamships carrying immigrants. Arthur initially vetoed it over states' rights concerns, but approved it after revisions gave feds more authority. He also signed the broader Immigration Act of 1882, levied a 50-cent tax on immigrants, excluded groups seen as potential public burdens, mentally ill, intellectually disabled, criminals, an early move toward federal immigration control.
And now, this really defining moment, Chinese immigration. A huge moral and political dilemma for Arthur.
The context is crucial here. The 1868 Burlingame Treaty allowed unrestricted flow of Chinese immigrants, mainly for labor. But after the Panic of 1873, the economic downturn, Chinese immigrants got blamed for lowering wages, especially out west. Fueled this nasty xenophobia, calls for exclusion. Hayes had vetoed an Exclusion Act in '79.
So in 1882, Senator John F. Miller from California pushes a new bill, a 20-year ban on Chinese laborers, passed overwhelmingly. Huge pressure on Arthur.
But Arthur, he made a really principled stand. He vetoed that first bill, argued a 20-year ban wasn't just unfair, it violated the renegotiated 1880 treaty, which only allowed a reasonable suspension, not a long prohibition.
Praised in the East, condemned in the West.
Exactly. Eastern papers lauded his moral and legal stance. Western states, where anti-Chinese feeling was intense, were furious.
So Congress passed a new bill reducing the ban to 10 years.
Right. Arthur still objected, still saw it as violating the treaty as unfair, but he ultimately acceded to this compromise. Signed the Chinese Exclusion Act into law, May 6, 1882.
A tough spot. Principle versus overwhelming political pressure.
A stark example. Forced to sign a law he found objectionable. And it's worth remembering, part of that law denying citizenship to U.S.-born Chinese Americans was later found unconstitutional in the United States v. Wong Kim Ark in 1898. A complex issue, a dark chapter, where Arthur navigated intense pressure.
Another key area for Arthur where he really left a mark. The Navy. Post-Civil War, U.S. naval power had just collapsed, hadn't it? From nearly 700 ships down to 52, mostly obsolete wooden ones.
Yeah, pretty sorry state. For about 15 years, the military focus was all on the Indian Wars out west, coastal defenses. But as the frontier settled, people started worrying about the Navy's weakness. Garfield's Navy Secretary, William H. Hunt, had started advocating reform, but his time was cut short.
Arthur picked up that cause forcefully.
But he did, strongly advocated for a stronger Navy in his 1881 annual message, gave full authority to his new Navy Secretary, William E. Chandler, to modernize things.
And Chandler was aggressive about it.
Very. Swiftly started purging the Navy of the old wooden canvas warship supporters, established the Naval War College in Newport, appointed an advisory board to plan modernization. The goal, a modern Navy, steel hulls, steam power, capable of protecting U.S. interests thousands of miles away, not just coasts.
And the result, the ABCD ships.
Exactly. Congress funded them. Arthur signed the law. 3 state-of-the-art steel cruisers, Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, and an armed dispatch steamer, Dolphin. Collectively, the Squadron of Evolution, the birth of the modern U.S. Navy, really.
Interesting detail. The contracts went to the low bidder, John Roach and Sons, even though Chandler had apparently lobbied for them before. Politics never far away.
True. And Democratic opposition later stalled further expansion, constant political battles. But despite delays, the Navy undeniably improved under Arthur. The last of those ABCD ships entered service in 1889. Chandler famously said he did his best work in destroying the old Navy. Arthur championed that radical shift, laid the groundwork for America's rise as a naval power, often overlooked achievement.
What about civil rights in the post-Reconstruction South? A really complex challenge. How could Republicans challenge Democrats and protect black Southerners when the party itself was shrinking there?
This led to an interesting pragmatic strategy. This new party, the Readjusters, emerged in Virginia, won elections on a platform of more school funding for black and white schools, ending the poll tax, ending the whipping post.
Okay.
Many Northern Republicans, Arthur included, saw them as a more viable progressive ally than the traditional, often corrupt, Southern Republican Party remnants. So Arthur directed federal patronage in Virginia through the Readjusters, supported them to achieve some civil rights gains, tried it elsewhere in the South, but only really worked in Virginia.
How was that received? Mixed feelings.
Definitely mixed. Some black Republicans felt betrayed, felt like he was abandoning allies. But other prominent black leaders like Frederick Douglass, ex-Senator Blanche K. Bruce, they endorsed the administration's actions. Recognized these independents often had more liberal racial policies, maybe a better shot at real change.
But the Supreme Court threw a wrench in things with the civil rights cases in 1883, striking down the Civil Rights Act of 1875.
Yeah, gutted federal protection against private discrimination. Arthur expressed his disagreement strongly in a message to Congress, called for new laws, but he was unable to persuade Congress to pass any new legislation. Shows the limits of presidential power against the courts and a resistant Congress.
He did intervene successfully in that West Point case, though. Cadet Johnson Whitaker.
He did overturn a court-martial ruling against Whitaker, a black cadet, after the Judge Advocate General found the prosecution was illegal and based on racial bias.
Yeah.
A significant presidential intervention for civil rights, using his direct executive power.
Okay, moving west. What about the challenge of polygamy in Utah Territory, the LDS Church under government pressure?
Arthur aligned firmly with Garfield's view. Saw polygamy as criminal, morally harmful. In 1882, he signed the Edmunds Act, made polygamy a federal crime, barred polygamists from public office, juries, even voting. Decisive federal intervention in a really contentious social issue.
And Native American policy. Relations were changing as the Indian Wars wound down.
Yeah, public sentiment slowly shifting toward more favorable treatment. Arthur urged Congress to increase funding for Native American education. It did increase in '84, though not as much as he wanted. He also favored moving to the allotment system, individual Native Americans owning land, not tribes, communally.
Which seemed like reform then, but
Right. While seen as liberal reform at the time, a way to civilize and integrate, it eventually proved detrimental. Most allotted land ended up being resold, often fraudulently, at low prices to white speculators. Huge land loss, cultural disruption. Arthur couldn't get Congress to adopt it, but the Dawes Act of 1887 later implemented it, with those devastating results.
and settler encroachment on native lands.
Arthur initially resisted it, but after his Interior Secretary Teller assured him certain lands were protected, Arthur opened the Crow Creek Reservation in Dakota Territory to settlers by executive order in 1885, believed it was legal.
But his successor, Grover Cleveland, reversed that order quickly.
Yeah, just a few months later, Cleveland found the title rightfully belonged to the Native Americans. A swift reversal highlighting how contentious and often unjust these land policies were. 9. Health decline, 1884 election, and post-presidency.
You know, on a more personal level, and this was largely unknown to the public at the time, shortly after becoming president, Arthur got this private, very serious diagnosis: Bright's disease, severe kidney ailment, nephritis, potentially fatal.
Yeah, a huge burden he carried privately. He tried hard to keep it secret, understanding the political fallout of a sick president. But by 1883, rumors of his illness began to circulate. People noticed he was thinner, looked older, visibly struggled with the pace of the job.
He tried to get away, rejuvenate his health, tripped to Florida in April '83.
Yeah, but it had the opposite effect. Caused him intense pain, made things worse. Later that year, though, on Senator George Graham Vest's advice, he took a more successful trip, visited Yellowstone National Park, the first national park.
And that helped, both his health and maybe publicizing the park.
Seems so. The Yellowstone trip was more beneficial. He returned refreshed after 2 months, a brief respite, but the underlying illness, of course, remained.
So as the 1884 election approaches, James G. Blaine is the clear Republican favorite. Arthur considered running for a full term.
He did. He'd grown into the office, but he started realizing neither faction of the party would really back him. Half-breeds were for Blaine. Stalwarts were divided, weakened. Reformers weren't certain enough of his reform credentials to pick him over Senator George F. Edmunds.
Some business leaders and Southern Republicans, the ones who owed him jobs, rallied around him.
Eventually, yeah. But by then, Arthur had decided against a serious campaign, recognized the uphill battle, likely compounded by his failing health.
He kept up a token effort, though. Didn't want dropping out to raise questions about his health or actions.
Right. Didn't want to look weak or like he was hiding something. But by the convention in June, it was clear Blaine would win. Blaine led on the first ballot, won on the fourth. Arthur got just 207 votes. He accepted defeat with equanimity, very dignified, and played no role in the campaign. Stayed silent.
During his term, he made 2 Supreme Court appointments.
Correct. First was Horace Gray, respected jurist from Massachusetts, replaced Justice Nathan Clifford. Easily confirmed, served over 20 years. The second vacancy was when Justice Ward Hunt retired in January '82. Arthur first nominated his old boss, Roscoe Conkling.
Really? Even after their falling out?
Yeah, Arthur doubted Conkling would accept, but felt obligated to offer it. Conkling was confirmed, but then declined the appointment, the last time that's ever happened.
Wow.
Arthur's next choice, Senator George Edmunds, also declined. Finally, Arthur nominated Samuel Blatchford, a judge on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. He accepted, approved by the Senate within 2 weeks.
So Arthur leaves office in 1885, served his term, returned home to New York City, declined to run for the Senate, preferred going back to law, private life.
Yeah, but his health really limited him. He was often too ill to leave his house, made few public appearances after '85. The Bright's disease was getting worse.
And then that dramatic final act, November 16th, 1886, just 2 days before he died, he ordered nearly all of his papers, both personal and official, burned.
Incredible, isn't it? Deliberately destroying his own historical record, robbed historians of invaluable insights, leaves so much to speculation about his thoughts, his motives.
The very next morning, he suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. Died the following day, November 18th, 1886. Only 57 years old.
Yeah, relatively young. His post-presidency was the second shortest of any president who lived past their term. Only James K. Polk's was shorter. Little time for reflection or shaping his legacy.
Private funeral, buried with his family in Albany Rural Cemetery. Beautiful bronze angel monument marks his grave. Outro. So we started this deep dive with this figure, often just, put in the footnotes, a political operative deep in the spoils system, the gentleman boss of patronage. But what we've really unpacked today is this story of profound, surprising transformation, how character can evolve under unexpected pressure.
Absolutely. We've seen this incredible journey. From machine politician, collector of the port, master of patronage, to the president who signs and robustly implements the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, dismantling the very system that created him.
Yeah.
And his presidency had other principled moments, too.
Yeah.
That initial veto of the discriminatory Chinese Exclusion Act. His determined, though ultimately frustrated, effort to prosecute the Starwood scandal. His actions consistently challenged expectations from allies and critics alike, makes him really complex, compelling.
And it's truly striking how highly his contemporaries regarded him. Such a contrast to his modern obscurity. Journalist Alexander McClure wrote, "No man ever entered the presidency so profoundly and widely distrusted, and no one ever retired, more generally respected, alike by political friend and foe."
Even Mark Twain, high praise, said it would be hard indeed to better President Arthur's administration.
Yet, despite that contemporary respect, his modern historical ranking is usually mediocre or average, consistently called one of the least memorable presidents.
Zachary Karabell has that insightful assessment, noting that even though he was physically stretched and emotionally strained, mostly from his secret illness, he strove to do what was right for the country. That contrast, contemporary respect versus historical obscurity, is one of the most puzzling things about his legacy.
And while his personal legacy might fade, there are those tangible reminders. GI posts named for him, Union College gave him an honorary LLD, that magnificent statue in Madison Square Park, unveiled by his sister Mary. His face on a stamp in 1938, a dollar coin in 2012. Even Arthur Avenue in the Bronx.
The irony is rich, isn't it? Despite these things, his personal legacy just often fades from public consciousness, maybe overshadowed by the bigger, more dramatic figures of his time. Secretary of War Elihu Root observed at his statue dedication, Arthur was isolated in office and unloved by his own party. He deliberately cut ties with his patrons, yet he was wise in statesmanship and firm and effective in administration. A president who, against the odds, chose principle over party, quiet competence over political flash. A powerful lesson in unexpected leadership.
Yeah.
Which really raises an important question for you, our listener. What does Chester A. Arthur's story teach us about the capacity for a profound change in leadership, especially when someone's thrust into power by unexpected, even tragic events? Can a person truly shed past allegiances to serve a higher moral purpose? And how often do we as a society maybe underestimate the impact of quiet confidence, of principled evolution over those more flamboyant but perhaps less effective presidencies?
Indeed. Chester A. Arthur reminds us that some of history's most profound lessons, well, they come from its most overlooked corners. His is a story of a president who, despite his background, ultimately defied expectations to leave a truly lasting mark on American governance, something to mull over as you continue your own deep dives into the unexpected narratives of the past.